A team of South African disaster response specialists has returned from Mozambique, where they helped with flood relief efforts. The team, which included Rescue South Africa and the University of Johannesburg experts, Hartnady, as well as Xavier and Millar, was deployed at the request of the Mozambican government and the UN. The floods, which were caused by unprecedented rainfall intensified by La Niña, left 70 people dead and 6 missing. The rescue specialists assisted more than 450 people to get to dry land despite limited aerial support. Rescue specialists Connor as well as Xavier from the University of Johannesburg are joining me now. Thank you very much both for your time.
Thanks.
I mean, it must be quite the experience. We see it on television and having to rescue hundreds of people who are all equally in danger. There were visuals on television of individuals on the roofs of building. How do we go about, Xavier, maybe let me start with you. How do you go about prioritizing who needs help there and then?
It is quite a challenge because when you arrive, obviously, you can only take so many people in one trip in the helicopter at a time, and everyone's desperate. But the typical way of going about it is women and children first, or those that are in need of medical attention urgently. It is quite a process because, you know, typically a rescuer will be left from the helicopter there, and then multiple trips will be made for, you know, daylight time, how it allows, as well as weather. So the prioritizing is quite hard and quite difficult. But like I said, it's typically women and children, and then those that need medical attention.
Connor, you've spoken about the need for helicopters in such operations and how important they are. How do rescue teams adapt then when there is limited technical support? But before you do answer, just let's go through the pronunciation of your surname there.
It's Connor Hartnady.
Hartnady,
yes,
there we go. Let's speak about helicopters and the limited technical support and how you go about doing your work.
So as I've alluded to before, helicopters are an essential part of flood work, or flood, whether it's dropping off food aid or doing rescue. It's a very, very important asset to have. So you want to ensure that the coordination of those assets is done as seamlessly as possible. We talk about flying an empty leg, meaning, say, for example, we're moving to go and evacuate people off the top of a building within an area. We get identified what, you know, the location. We then want to ensure that when we're flying there, that we perhaps fill the aircraft with food that we can drop off in 3-4 locations and then fly those people back. And again, it's time sensitive. Rescues, we will get there as quickly as needed. By that I mean somebody that's been holding into a tree for up to 24 hours, rising floodwaters. You know, we try and triage as much as possible the areas that need our assistance. But yeah, super valuable in any flooding situation. And it was very well supported this year. We had 3 aircraft from the South African Air Force, and then there were other private entities, 2 aircraft from Capital Air, and then 3 other aircraft. In fact, one of them was the Oppenheimer's aircraft, and it's a nice big machine, so it does allow us to bring a lot of people back from areas, and then we are able to send food aid out, water. There are some limitations with the hoists that are available. That allows us the airframe to hover above an area, and then we can hoist down to evacuate people. But ideally, what we want to do in that instance is let the rescuer be lowered down, move to an area where he can set up a landing zone because we can move more people if the aircraft is actually on the ground.
Sure. I mean, you speak about the technical aspect, but let's speak about the spirit of the people of Mozambique during these operations. You know, I'm pretty sure that there's an atmosphere that you can talk about, not just of desperation for people to be saved, but tell us about like the emotions that go on and what you've picked up.
Well, certainly when we arrived in Maputo, we were welcomed by the name escapes me, but it was Anamaris and Bruno. They were the team that came to collect us from the airport. And straight off the bat, they were really, really excited about getting us out to the place where we could make a difference. Unfortunately, it was a 2-hour drive. It was a joint operations centre. It was an open piece of land in an area, I don't know the Portuguese name, but it's 3 February Village. It's near an area, Palmyra. And we were there and we set up, or they'd already set up this landing zone for all the aircraft to come in, where we could get food and the people that they had dropped off clerked and moved to health centres if necessary, or into the temporary shelters that had been established close by. But certainly from a technical standpoint, sorry, not from a emotional or humanitarian standpoint, the INGD, which is their local disaster management personnel, they were managing, but there was volunteers everywhere that were really helping the people. And I think Xavier, I was doing a lot of the coordination. Sure. Xavier was involved at the coalface, and I think based on what the team had seen when they'd come back, they'd seen some fairly harrowing sights. Perhaps you can speak about the lady that had delivered a baby on top of a rooftop.
On a plastic basin, was that the story?
Oh, yeah, indeed. I wasn't involved with that particular incident myself, but people were trapped for days. Now, someone who's now cut off from any sort of access to healthcare, who's expecting and under the stress of this whole situation, I believe across the country there were several deliveries that did indeed happen. And in the area where we were working, there was this one incident, and the lady did indeed deliver and give birth to this baby. And then you can imagine you're surrounded by flood water, you're sitting on top of a roof, and all they could do was just keep the baby in a basin. And the mother and the baby were then collected in a helicopter, delivered to the joint operational area, and both were in good health. So it was a good success. And, just on, like you were talking about the emotional side, being on the ground, connecting with the people, it was actually quite almost inspiring to see their sort of resilience and their will. As we landed, the spirits were lifted. They see you there as rescue. It's their ticket out of here. And in days later, we started to do some community outreach to cut-off communities where they did not want to be evacuated, but they were still isolated by floodwaters. So we would insert via helicopter and then go do an assessment to see if there's any medical need, to see what's going on, to try and just do a bit of sort of health education to prevent any, outbreak of disease like cholera and such. And then, getting in there with these communities, you could really just see the spirit of resilience and in the face of this massive disaster, still carrying on with life, supporting one another. And that was really uplifting and really good to see.
You speak about community members not wanting to be evacuated. Is this in hopes that they'll salvage whatever's remaining of their homes and properties? What was the reason for that?
So you must remember now that when you're being evacuated, you're leaving everything behind. And you are indeed taking your worldly possessions, everything you can, to carry with you in a small bag wrapped in a blanket, and you might come back to nothing. And a lot of people were in situations where they managed to still have a bit of high ground, even though their homes were flooded, but could still keep some of their belongings on the roof, and they still had animals and that, and could kind of gather in one area of the village where they were able to sort of survive together. So they didn't want to leave that behind, because you're not sure what you're coming back to, you're not sure when you're going to come back, you're not sure where you're going. So you can understand why their reluctance to go. And then indeed they did stay. And hopefully as time goes, the water subsides, and then they can sort of rebuild and continue on with normal life.
Yeah. Connor, tell us about how the academic side of the work that you do at the UJ Rescue Simulation Center then translates into the boots on the ground aspect.
But if you look at the principle of things happen before, during, and after a disaster or an event, by being on the ground and having the experience that we've had, we are now able to take that into the rescue center and develop systems or equipment, even looking at some research, to then, when we start preparing again before the incident occurs, we have a better idea of what to expect. This is now, I think it's our third or fourth disaster response into Mozambique. I was there in 2019 for Beira. We took those learnings and we kind of implemented them and pushed them into the design of the center. And certainly the equipment that we use, as an example, IP67 rated headsets, because they're getting wet. Can you swim with them? And testing all these different devices in the rescue center. The rescue center allows us to create as close to real as possible. We have a helicopter simulator which has got a hoist. It's got downdraft, it's got noise. We've got a pool that has waves and rain. So you can really create the most inclement type of weather in a controlled environment. And we can stop it. So if we stop and we say, well, this is, we want to change something, we can do that. So it gives us that flexibility. So, and then I've mentioned this before, but it gives us credibility as lecturers. When we're standing in front of a group of students who have seen you perhaps on TV operating in this environment, when you bring that wealth of knowledge back, there's far more credibility into what you're saying. You're not some book smart lecturer that doesn't really know what they're doing. We do have that experience.
Connor Hartnady,
yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, and Xavier Millar, thank you for the work that you've been doing out there, and both are rescue specialists and lecturers at UJ.